Welcome back, everybody, to the Overwatch League. And if the match we just witnessed was the Battle of the Titans, this one is going to be a bit like David and Goliath. But we've all seen how that played out. David won.
Did you see it?
I didn't see it personally, but this one might be the makings of it. We've got the San Francisco Shock against the Washington Justice, and I want to leave the idea in people's minds, Josh. I just want to.
Yeah. I also, though, I think that there are some interesting components to this because both of these teams have picked up a lot of Vancouver Titans players. And so we've got this kind of weird mix of like people playing against each other and people with like rivalries that exist from previously, like San Francisco Shock versus the Titans last year.
One of the battles that's going to be taking place, obviously, is the Sigmas between these two teams, because you've set it up perfectly, Josh. You've got Janu on the one side, and of course Choi Hyobin. Choi Hyobin being our Grand Finals MVP last year, a fantastic tank player, and he's no slouch on Sigma as well, as you can see from the numbers. And he is going to be going up against Janu, the guy that he played in the Grand Finals, the guy that the entirety of the San Francisco Shock have battled against for almost the entirety of last year. And Janu, this is his statistics, obviously, from last year. It's a little bit unfair to include him from this year because he's still settling into the Washington Justice, but it just goes to show what this guy is capable of on an individual basis.
Yeah, definitely. We know that both of these players are excellent at Sigma as a role, and Choi Hyobin has kept that up whilst playing for an elite level team so far this year. So that's kind of a cool little theme that's going to be running throughout this match. You've also got Stitch, who didn't really get much playtime. You can see him here starting for the Washington Justice. And Washington, like you said, they're still settling in. They're still trying to find their footing, and it's a rough kind of position for them to be in, still with people on high ping and trying to settle in, trying to find that synergy.
It really is, yeah. And as you can see, Washington, they don't have many players to run, but these are the ones they're going to be rolling out with. On the other side, the San Francisco Shock going to be going with Rascal and Striker as their DPS duo, and I've got no complaints about that. Striker, I think, in my opinion, way back when we were having this conversation, I think was making a case, if not was, the best tracer in the world at some point, because it was between Sabiobi and Striker. If you can all think back to the initial inaugural season of the Overwatch League, he's definitely no slouch on that role.
Yeah, I mean, Striker and Rascal's cool and all, but it's the rest of the San Francisco starting roster that really gets my bald head scratching, because they've got Super and Smurf in, and Violet and Moth. So that indicates to me that they're going to be playing like some kind of Orisa Reinhardt, Lucio Batiste kind of composition, like the double shield, but with the two main tanks coming out to play. And I think that could be really fun on Nepal, because it gives Moth a bit of a chance to still get playtime with this team, even though we're in a double flex support kind of meta, and we get to see Super with the big daddy shatters on Father's Day. And there's nothing better than that.
Don't really want to hear the word daddy and Super in the same sentence, but thank you for that, Josh.
Well, Super had a piece with his daddy earlier on.
He did, yes, he did. And he actually, his father, I think, said that he loved him, but Super just kind of smiled at him, which, sometimes love is reciprocated in odd ways. But in this case, we're going to be heading into this match, and it is, of course, Nepal. Now, Josh, you said that we're expecting to see, some odd compositions with Super and Smurf in the lineup at the same time. What we've seen some teams run are very odd compositions. Sometimes we've seen teams run a bit of Winston Ball. Sometimes we've seen a bit of Ball and Roadhog compositions as well, when they expect the other team to run dive compositions, because it's very effective at dealing with Winston.
Yes. Now, the Shock absolutely could experiment a little bit here. And if they run this, I mean, I would love this. I've never, ever before seen Striker play Genji in a match. I've never seen it. So I want to see it.
Genji's quite good, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, I would love to see it. I mean, he's a very mechanically gifted player. There have been times where we've seen Wrecking Ball and Zarya, but I don't believe it's going to happen here. This is a massive bait from the Shock.
Okay. Now, this looks like more to the composition of what they want to be running with. The Washington Justice is going to be going with a pretty similar composition of their own, as you can see. And, so it's going to be that Winston Ball composition that we've seen from both of these teams now. And they're going to be running almost a mirror match. But the Washington Justice are going to be running an Ana for the Nana boost, and, of course, the Mercy just to pocket the Pharah player, whereas the Shocker leaning more into the Immortality field.
Well, Sinatra, when his skin came out, recently said that he thinks Rascal will be the MVP so far this year, and he's certainly in the running for sure. Nice shot onto Arc from long distance. We don't get to see him on the Pharah that often, but he is a very good Pharah when he wants to play it.
Chuba, though, Farah is one of his more comfort picks, and Smurf gets slept up in the front line. That gives Chuba an opportunity to get the opening kill. Wonderful
Nice
shot there.
shot.
That was nice fade away down to Striker. With the damage boost, that's enough damage to just instantly give the Tracer, take her out of the fight. Wonderful shots from Chuba, and I like this from Washington. They're playing to their strengths, you know. Chuba is really known for his projectile aim, and as I said, Farah, one of his most dominant roles, and he is really showcasing it here.
Yeah, the Justice have struggled a lot playing Tuber on the Reaper and these kind of things, like the hit scan heroes recently, but Tuber on the Farah is much more comfortable for it. And I would advise you all at home right now to never Google Super Wrecking Ball. But that's what he's on, and I'm excited to see it, Bren.
Yeah, Tuber though has the nano boost available, but no ultimate, and in fact he just fired a couple of rockets into his face, but still an even fight now. M-God goes down. You can see Striker trying to make it happen. Rascal with a rocket removes Tuber. He's taken out of the fight, and an instant resurrect onto Violet here. Violet happy to take that 1v1. Removes Stitch from the fight, takes him out. See Jano just desperately trying to hold on, just trying to build up some of this capture control point, but Rascal doesn't even need to look where he's firing the rockets.
Cool guys.
Kill and a flip over.
Cool guys don't look at rockets, Bren. And it's a nice start for the Washington Justice. In that first fight, they got a sleep onto Super, and then they were able to kill Stitch with a, kill Striker with a damage boosted rocket. So they got a nice start to it, but they weren't really able to repel the retake. So we need to see a little bit more here. I think Tuber definitely needs to be winning the 1v1 if they want a chance.
My!
Those are some
That's going to be an instant res. See, Rascal, look at his position. He's trying to deny the resurrect, just wants to hover over it, but look at this. Meanwhile, Striker trying to take out the back line. Aim-God will fall, but Raw peeled for him effectively and will take him out. Though Moth is given enough space to try and go for the resurrect onto Violet. Brings him up, and Rascal using his barrage to even it out. And now it's a difficult scenario. Do Washington even want to commit any more to this? Now they do resurrect Raw, and Raw does have a primal rage, so maybe still winnable for them, but Rascal is looking monstrous right now. So many rockets being hit.
Yeah, great direct rockets. And that's just pushing Tuber back so that he can't really help in this war on the ground. Oh, potential for a lot of knockups there for Raw, but I think he missed a little bit of his tech with the primal.
And this fight is a little bit all over the place. It's a battle of the Farahs trying to take their own fights. Tanks as well are all over the place. Very mobile compositions being ran, so it's a little bit harder to keep track and kind of coordinate who you want to be focusing on here. But the Shock are still in control, and they have a lot of ultimates to work with now.
I want to take a look at Striker as well and see what he's doing on the ground, because this guy was just such an amazing Tracer previously, and we haven't had an opportunity to see him play that much. He's just pistol in the Farah Mercy combo at the moment, but this guy was maybe the best aimer that we had out of all of the Tracers in the league.
Yep. Yeah, I completely agree with that. He showcased it way back when. He might still have it, but Chuba with the quick 1-2. That's all you need, really, to bring down a Farah. Doesn't matter if you're being pocketed or not. He's going straight into the fray. The barrage is unleashed, but they shut him down. Shock so good at turning lost fights into winnable moments, and they do just that. They find the opening, they find the weaknesses, and they just wedge themselves inside of it. And that's going to be the overtime finally burning over. Stitch is the last person who can really touch onto the point, and he gets body blocked and removed 100% now for the Shock, and that's going to be the round in their favor. Wonderfully done, and it feels it's not a dominant performance by any means by the San Francisco Shock. The Washington have looked competitive in it, but I think the Shock have just got that factor that you really can't prep for. You know what I mean, Josh? Where they're just able to find openings from weaker teams where they make the mistakes.
Yeah, for sure. I think they just played the map geometry better as well. Washington, when they were trying to retake the point, they basically got nothing done. There was very little coordination between Washington in terms of their tanks. They tried to set up a couple of dives a few times, but it never really forced anything out. And it's difficult against Violet because he's just such a beast in the backline. And now he's on a comfort position as well. This is Super on the Sigma. Never ever Google Super Sigma.
Never ever Google it. But we're seeing the San Francisco Shock running the old Ash Torb combination. It gives you a lot of staying power. You can anchor down with the turret. You've got Bob as well to contest it a little bit. This is a composition that the Valiant actually ran against Gladiators and caused them to all just mold on social media. And now the San Francisco Shock are trying to utilize it for their own. A lot of spam damage as well. Think about this. The arcing bolts of molten lead that Rascal can send out. It's a perfect shot to try and really connect them, and that is going to be the Holt Smurf. Just sucks Raw into the depths of the pole. interesting that they managed to dig that far down, but after that pick-off, it's going to be easy pickings for them. They're able to just roll over to Washington Justice, and they should be able to cap it. Indeed, they do.
Super asserts dominance in the Sigma battle. Of course, that's what we were talking about earlier on when we said there were two amazing Sigmas on these teams. We, of course, meant Janu and Super.
Yep.
But,
Super,
you know,
who played in the grand final.
Yeah, of course.
I don't want to dig at Super too much because...
I mean, it is just funny. This is not a role that he normally plays, right? This is just entertaining.
Yeah.
You know, he's great at tank. I've seen him play Sigma when he gets to his ranked games and stuff, but I believe this is the first time he's ever played it in a match.
Nice stick from Chuba there. Might be able to set something up, but I think that was the Immortality field that maybe saved him, or maybe just not enough damage actually applied onto Super, but the Halt will pull him in. Gives enough opportunities for Chuba to eventually take him out of the fight. The amplification matrix is kited eventually. Gravitic Flux going to be used here. Moth slammed into the ground, taken out. This is more than enough picks now. Surely that the Washington Justice should be able to get a bit of capture progress now as long as they clean up the rest of these players, and indeed, they look like they're about to do just that.
Yeah, Smurf got evaporated. He got his ragdoll just sent towards the heavens. Justice with a nicely executed flank there. They just rotated themselves around, found Super in a slightly exposed position, pulse spawn to do damage, chase down the kill. All fairly default, but nicely executed from the Washington Justice. And they keep putting pressure on the point as well.
Yeah. And the reason I was defending Super as well, a lot of people are probably not even aware of his stream personality, but he's a good player, despite the fact that we keep making a couple of jokes. That's a lot of ultimates committed, and the Washington Justice coming out reasonably on top. They get 2 great pickoffs. Chuba's in a bit of trouble here, though. Doesn't have his recall available. Peeled away with the coach gun. Bob sent into the back line. The shield will block the line of sight, but now it's a counter Bob, but Striker sends him again off the edge of the map. I'm not sure how that happened. A little bit clowny. Chuba now hunting for another opportunity now as he tries to take out Violet, tries to go for the one tap, but look at that. The team peel is there. They remove him, take him out. And Violet slowly building up this amplification matrix.
Isn't it a bit weird, Brent, to see Shock not going at full throttle? This team always puts out the most amazing roster possible and tries to crush their opponent. And here they've got, you know, Super and Moth playing off roles, and they're kind of actually being fairly competitive with the Washington Justice. This is strange. Normally the Shock really like to crush their opposition. We saw it yesterday when they played against Paris.
It is weird, yeah.
Yeah, they're just kind of taking it a little easy.
Yeah, normally we associate Shock with just, as you said, total dominance. They like to, you know, not really leave any stone unturned, but we'll see Super now using the Gravitic Flux. He's trying to force something out. He does get the Transcendence out of the Washington Justice, but the Washington Justice have, you know, capped the point back over to their favor. Now that Gravitic Flux, I don't think got anything. That was onto a turret. It's hard to look at the turret. It's kind of a robot. But
it's welded into the floor.
Yeah, a little bit difficult there. Bit of a waste of an ultimate. Now the Shock have an opportunity to push back in, but Super will go down. Now the Transcendence used. We'll see if they can get any kills off the back of it. Fall very, very low here. Violet having to use that Immortality field just to keep his team alive. Yoink's back up again. Washington, they do get the picks necessary, and Rascal has to try and make something work here because the overtime is now burning and the picks have rolled all the way to the Washington Justice. So they are going to be able to get around on the board here, and the Shock, I think, need to reassess how they're approaching this game, because you are right, Josh. Normally the Shock are the ones who they field in their core roster, but they've got Twilight, they've got Violet, and if they're going to be running a bit of, you know, the Batiste Zen compositions, you would see Twilight be playing instead of Moth. That's what we've come to kind of think. I think a part of this is that with the nature of hero pools, the practice is a little bit more stressful. Sometimes it's nice to take your foot off the gas, but I wasn't joking when I did say David versus Goliath, and if we think back to how that story ended, well, Goliath did get taken down, so the hubris of, sorry, for those of you who haven't actually read the Bible. The Shock, their hubris might be their downfall.
I thought the Shock would try and run some kind of a Rissa Rhine rush strategy here, but instead, again, they're putting Super and Smurf on the Winston and Ball, and they're going for this Tracer Farah. It's going to be mirrored by the Washington Justice, but I think this does put the two teams a little more even compared to the overwhelming advantage you would normally expect the San Francisco Shock to have.
Yeah, Chuba just going to be sending in these rockets now, and they are just willing to take this duel straight up, but it is kind of trying to beat the Washington at what they play best here. And Rascal gets the nice shots onto Arc, and that is going to make it so much easier now, because it means that literally anyone can just focus on Chuba, and they will be able to bring him out. The heals are not going to be there. A couple of players remaining. That's all that stands between the Shock and capturing up this control point now. As they do that, they're in a much better position to hold on to this.
My pet theory, Bren, is that Krusty, as the head coach, took a day off for Father's Day. And the San Francisco Shock have decided just to run whatever comp Super came up with, and he really fancied playing Sigma. So he just really wanted to be subbed in today.
Fair enough.
That's my pet theory.
Sigma and Wrecking Ball. That's the name of the game for Super, for sure. I could believe it to a degree, but the Washington Justice, I think, are going to be taking any opportunities they can to push forward, because it doesn't matter if, okay, bit of a whiff there with a pulse bomb from the Striker, but Rascal still gets the damage boosted rocket there onto AimGod. Removes him, Super with the power drive, a nice tech. Takes out Raw. Chuba equalizes it though, and it is a scrappy fight, a scrappy engagement. Moth being hunted down, but eventually the recall from Stitch will force him to focus on the front line. It's going to be the recap going their way.
And the heroes that Janu's ended up playing have fit into his wheelhouse completely. Janu was actually the first ever person to pick up Wrecking Ball in a professional match when the hero was first released. And, you know, you allow Stitch on the Tracer and Tuber on the Pharah. The Washington Justice are actually playing reasonably decent Overwatch in round 2 and 3 here. They've managed to retake the point. They're getting their coordination down a little bit. It's okay from them. It's pretty decent.
Yep, yeah, it is. It's pretty decent. And if they even come close now as well to stopping this one, I know that the picks are kind of rolling in. The barrage by Tuber doesn't really get anything, but that's okay.
Oh, they're tracking.
Yeah, Striker able to find that pick pretty easily, and then they recap the point as well. The trouble is these fights are so scrappy now, Josh. It's going back and forth from where the picks are being found all over the place. It's the nature of having such mobile compositions. It's hard to tell really which way the fights are going. Still, Smurf is going to be able to get this kill into AimGod as the peel wasn't quite there. Raw's using his own Primal Rage in the background. And I think this is just going to give the slight edge to the Washington Justice in terms of holding on to this point.
Raw and Stitch are doing a lot as a duo in round 3. They've been able to find picks all over the place. Actually worked on the coordination quite a lot. Oh, wow. That was tech! Striker! Playing around the shield and then just blinks and pulse bombs onto Raw. That's fantastic.
Striker 66 health. Perfect blink to not go over the edge there. Picks up the health pack. Rascal now with the barrage, and he's going to be looking for an opportunity to use this. He doesn't have the nano boost to really help him get the maximum out of it, but that's okay. Right now, focusing on Chuba, trying to take him down. Now the barrage gets used as he realized Chuba just kind of jumped down to the low ground, but no barrage value there. No kills being going in for him, but he does get the pick up onto Janu. Even trades, though, as Chuba evens it out as well, taking down Violet and Super, and Striker removed from the fight. Good opportunities here. Chuba with 3 kills. Might be able to get a 4th as well. Rascal fell very, very low. Had to get out of the fight as well. These rockets are connecting. You got to remind each other that when you give the Washington Justice the roles that they are comfortable with, they are a good team.
Yeah, they're a competent team at the very least, and they're able, you know, you really have to put a little bit of respect on them at the very least. Raw and Janu going very low, but it's 90%. It's last fight territory, and Arc, he pops his Valkyrie, but not in enough time to save Janu.
No one able to touch the point as well, which could be a bit of a pain in the backside for them. Arc does get the Resurrect kill onto AimGod, whilst the Tracer 1v1 happens, and secures enough space that Violet can now be resurrected, which means that the Shocker can have a huge advantage coming into this fight. Nice stick from Striker once more. Quick flick of the wrist, and he gets it, but an Anaboost is going to be keeping up Raw. Raw still with the Primal Rage, now has to use it just to stall this point out because it is 92% and counting. And if Raw doesn't get a pick off the back with his ultimate, this is looking very, very tricky now for the Washington Justice. They came so close to winning out this map. It was just a few key plays away. The mines laid out onto the floor. A couple of them exploding as well from that bubble that was laid down. Chuba does get the pick up onto Smurf. That could be an opening that they needed, but Smurf using, or Super I should say, with that pile driver, puts in enough damage into Raw, removes him from the fight once again. And the overtime will tick down, and it will be the San Francisco Shock who come out on top. But it was not made easy for them, and I think that if they go into the rest of this series thinking it's going to be an easy match, they're going to be quite upset.
Yeah, some fundamental mistakes there from the Washington Justice just allow that map to slip away from them. they didn't reset. It was like 80% when the San Francisco Shock turned it. It was
Never-ending
clearly not a
team
winnable fight, and they just kept throwing bodies in, throwing ultimates in. If they had tried to quickly reset, die on the point, they possibly could have got another engagement where they have that nano boost and the barrage to be able to use, pop the nano onto Raw, make some space, see if Tuba can turn anything. And at the end of the day, what we've had there is a map where Washington were on their best heroes, and the Shock felt like they were running at about 50%, and the Shock still end up coming out with the win. Yeah. So the Justice need to tighten things up a little bit more.
I do wonder if we're going to see some substitutions off the back of that. It was a very close map, but chances are, I think Shock may be giving the I don't want to say B team because I don't think there really exists a B team with Shock. They're all very capable players, but they want to give some of the other players a bit more playtime. Regardless, we're going to see what the outcome of this series is after the break. Do not go anywhere, guys.
The Overwatch League is brought to you by T-Mobile. Switch today and rank up to America's largest 5G network, T-Mobile. And by State Farm. For auto, home, or renters insurance, like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. The Overwatch League is brought to you by HyperX. Unleash your style, unleash your fury. With HyperX Fury Memory.
사실은 이제 시나트라가 저를 차기 MVP 후보로 뽑을 줄은 좀 몰랐고, 그래서 좀 되게 놀랬던 것 같고, 원래 그 이전부터 얘기했던 선수로는 스트라이커가 있었는데 왜 갑자기 저로 바꿨는지는 모르겠지만, 그래서 아무튼 시나트라가 저를 그렇게 생각해줘서 생각보다 기분은 많이 좋았던 것 같고, 그래서 이번 시즌 잘하면은 MVP 먹을 수 있지 않을까. 그래도 아무래도 이제 슈크에 혼자 남은 서브 딜러다 보니까 좀 더 노력해서 잘하는 모습 많이 보여주면은 좋은 성적과 함께 그러면 MVP 먹을 수 있을 것 같습니다.
So there you go, Rascal saying he's quite surprised at being nominated as a potential MVP after striker maybe was the other option. But Josh, I want to put it out there for the record. We did some pre-season predictions.
Yeah.
Did put Rascal down as my MVP. So
yeah, and I think that makes a lot of sense.
Claim that one.
He's really integral to the way that the Shock would usually play, but I mean, this is a double hit scan meta, so we haven't seen as much of him. Speaking of which, it's Choyobin and Ants are coming in as substitutes here for the San Francisco Shock, so they're changing things back to what we would consider to be a more default lineup for them.
Yes, I think our pet theory about the Shock just kind of rotating a couple of their players to give them some playtime on the stage, if you will, coming in correct here based on the number of swaps we've been seeing. And it is unusual, it was unusual I should say, from map 1, seeing the Shock kind of put in not a half-hearted roster, but definitely a roster that maybe wasn't quite applicable to the map at hand. And struggling to a degree with the Washington Justice and what they were running at it. So it's unusual. Normally we see the Shock just go full speed ahead 100%.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it does fit Nepal, kind of, because you have the ability to play those kind of divey styles, but it just doesn't really fit the Shock as well. Now, another player that's coming in, though, the player that I'm really excited to watch again is Twilight, because he looked like a beast when he played yesterday. And Twilight's just, he's so fantastic. He's been able to play the Batiste, and I think it was Hex yesterday that said that he was kind of the second best. Like, he said that Violet was the best Batiste, and Twilight was the second best. It is kind of ridiculous.
He is an absolutely absurd player across the board, top to bottom, and it feels like it is a wealth of riches. It's the rich getting richer with the San Francisco Shock when they acquired him as a player. He's one of the best flex supports that we've got in the league, alongside Violet, and now they're playing on the same roster at a time when we start to see these double flex support compositions. I think the term flex support is a bit outdated. We need a new term.
Yeah.
Kind of
damage
invented.
Support.
Yeah, damage support, I suppose. We really do need to come up with a new term because it's hard to say, But both of these players in the roster is a reality I didn't think I would see, but I'm all here for it, because it does feel like we are just being treated to tremendous plays across the board when these guys are in the same server.
And of course, he's playing against his former teammates as well. He's playing against Stitch and Janu. He was part of the Vancouver Titans, obviously, that original roster, the roster that made the grand finals last year, and he's going up against them. So I'm looking forward to this. I think it's going to be something special. It's weird kind of, Bren, because we think of Batiste as being this flex support kind of role, but most of the time this year, we've mostly seen main support, normally Lucio players, playing the Batiste. Yes, we haven't really seen these mechanical gods play too much Batiste. Almost Violet is the exception rather than the rule in terms of the fact that he used to play so much of it. Because when you get those Zen-Bap kind of duos, normally you let your flex support play the Zen because you have a higher damage output from there. So the competition, I feel, has been reduced a little bit, but Twilight jumps in and he just immediately looks excellent on the hero. That's a proof of what a kind of caliber player this guy is.
I completely agree with you, and it's interesting to think back as well because the Shock used to run Rascal as well on the Batiste as a role.
Have they got the three best Batistes?
You remember when Rascal? Here's the thing about Rascal as well. When we think about him as a player, whenever a new hero crops up, it always feels like he makes a case for the best in the world. He's always the one who's the most inventive and creative with a new character, a new hero. When it comes out, we saw it with Echo, we saw it with Batiste. He's just that kind of player. So yeah, maybe they do have the best three Batiste players in the league. It's hard to say, but they're being spoiled a little bit with the amount of talent they've got on that roster. Still, the Shock now running a more standard composition, a more standard roster. They are willing to take the Washington Justice a little bit more seriously, it feels like. And I hate to run with that narrative too much because it is a little bit disrespectful to the Washington Justice, but I'll be honest with you, we haven't seen that much from the Justice as of yet.
Oh yeah, I mean they've been looking poor in their games recently, and I think that you got to call it as you see it. So the Washington Justice have not been performing particularly well, and it's arguable whether Shock really thought that was the best roster that they could field on Nepal. It might just be a map-specific strategy, but it didn't look like it was the most comfortable thing in the world for them. But now we get to see whether Stitch on the Widowmaker can go up against Ants. This is going to be interesting. Ants has just been a god-tier raw aimer so far in 2020, especially on the Widow.
And Stitch on the Widowmaker is not a role he's known for. He has a lot to live up to right now to try and contest with Ants. It's going to be a difficult fight for him. Chuba as well on the Tracer, a role he's quite uncomfortable with. But the Shock going to be running this double sniper composition. We've seen a lot of teams actually roll with a lot more double sniper recently. It's been a while since we've seen it, but it's coming out to play a lot more. You can see the Shock just taking the early spam more right now. Going to be stopping this cart just at this choke point now. The Washington Justice rotating very quickly all the way around. They get the halt off, they get the accretion off, but the Immortality Field from Twilight stops a lot of the damage from converting into any kills.
Tuba is behind them, and they distracted enough to be able to get around this corner. But the flank from Striker just picks off Aim God and Arc a little too slow with that Immortality Field.
Oh my goodness, yep.
Oh, wow.
This feels like a bit of a shooting range right now for Arns. He's having a field day. Not really much to contest with him as well. It's only Stitch. A lot of pressure for Stitch to try and take these angles and take this duel with Arns when he has to worry about the threat of Striker as well. That's one thing that a lot of players don't really consider. But when you're just a lone Widowmaker and you have to rely on kind of your own raw skill, it's difficult. And you can see now that Stitch has made the switch over to the Hangzhou because of that. Hangzhou a lot better at taking the raw duel against two snipers at once. It's hard to headshot Hangzhou for one. When he's pulling back the bow, his hand gets in the way of his head hitbox, so it's hard to headshot him and get that one-shot kill.
He's also just a bit more mobile, right? Can flank, can play the shield war a little bit as well. He's just a bit more of a versatile hero. Pairs with the Tracer perhaps a little better. It's Tuba that I'm worried about, though, because even though he is in the right positions, the San Francisco Shock don't really look like they're respecting him too much. They're just leaving Ants at the back. They're like, yeah, Ants will be fine dealing with him.
They're not even putting any resources into him because they know Anzi had the infra side up. He can see everything. And now Striker's just, okay, just send in a Dragon Strike, why not? Bit of BM, I don't think that's really necessary, but does it anyway, forces the positioning. One more shot for Striker means one more elimination, and now we're down to a minute 30. That's all the Jesters have got to work with. And the Shock are putting on a show right now.
They really are. It's so difficult because if Tuba can't even get them to commit resources and he can't find picks, then he isn't really doing anything. Even though he's making all the right moves, if the Shock just ignore him and he doesn't punish them for it, then he's essentially useless. So Tuba absolutely needs to be producing a little bit more than this.
Pulse bomb, we'll see if we can get anything done, but the issue is he's on Junkertown. It's very wide, very open, and it's hard to get all the way into where you really need that pulse bomb to go without using all three of your blinks. While I was discussing that, the Shock just ended up committing a couple of ultimates. They use a Gravitic Flux. They get maximum value out of it. Troy finally seeing him on the Sigma roll that we were gassing him up for in the pre-game. And he's doing absolute bits on it. You can see him having a field day.
And it's only 30 seconds left. The time bank seems to have just evaporated faster than I even noticed it. And Washington have had realistically 0 good opportunities to be able to crack this defense. Bit of a halt and an accretion there as Tuba still is behind. I'm still just waiting for Tuba to do something. He's just hanging around behind, waiting for the rest of his team.
It's so difficult to do when you're playing on Junkertown. It's just too open to realistically get from point A to point B effectively. He's going to dive on a Striker, but Ants takes him out with a headshot. That's brutal. Oh my goodness. And a Dragon Strike just for good measure. No one really alive here, just Stitch. And he's not going to be able to touch. That's going to be a nice little hold at the choke point there for the San Francisco Shock. And now you start to see why we were kind of dragging that narrative forward, that the Shock maybe weren't trying as hard on that first map. Maybe they were fielding a bit of a subpar roster. You start to see it blossom and bloom into reality here.
Yeah, because, I mean, this is just the absolute dominance that you know the Shock for. This is what we expected coming into this match, honestly, as well. It's rough for Washington, but it is beautiful at times to watch the Shock play like this. And this isn't that much more uneven than their game against Paris yesterday, where, okay, Paris were playing some unconventional strategies, for sure, but the level of Shock dominance just shows that they are right back in it as the top team. And until somebody dethrones the San Francisco Shock, they are absolutely going to be the favorites in the Summer Showdown as well. It doesn't really matter what seed they come into it with. They did manage to actually get the top seed, I believe, for the previous tournament, for the May Melee.
Yes.
But even if they don't manage it this time, for whatever reason, they are the #1 team until someone manages to get to the grand finals and beat them there.
Yeah, the Shock as a team, if we're just going to talk about the franchise as a whole, I mean, they made a tremendous turnaround from their average performance in 2018 to become probably the most dominant team, I think, in Overwatch history. Now, some might say that's a bit unfair, because Overwatch has a long storied history with a lot of teams. I think Wolf might come at me for saying that, but at this rate, the San Francisco Shock have been just on the top of their game. So strong, so dominant for such a long period of time now.
Yeah.
It's going to be almost a year and a half where they've been realistically the top dogs. So
yeah, no one's ever done that before in Overwatch. I mean, that's just not been contested. You can argue about greatest team of all time because they didn't really do well in, before 2019. But in terms of their reign of dominance, they have definitely been the most dominant team. And you can see it in matches like this. They just shut down their opponents. Choyobin swooping around the outside. He's going to make so much space for one of his snipers that decides to play around with him.
Look how split Choi is playing. He's so far out, but all he's doing is forcing the line aside of Stitch. So Stitch cannot go man-to-man with him. He can't play into it. The Justice, they capitalize. They immediately jump on this. They're like, okay, if you're going to disrespect us that much by running Choi in an off angle, we're going to go full aggression into you. Thankfully, they get the pickoffs because of it, but Ans trades one out with Aim God going down.
Yeah, Aim God falling will allow Shock to reset and just try a bit more of a default strat. Striker moves back over to the Tracer as well. Always a pleasure to see Striker on Tracer, and he's really going to try and take this 1v1 in the side as well. Chuba's in a position where he's got teammates to rely on, but still forced out, and Striker, he picks off Raw.
You can just tell how uncomfortable Chuba feels playing this role, especially when we've just been watching Yaki and Shaz, and as I say that, he gets a nice little stick. Gets the follow-up as well, the beatdown, but as this is happening, the front line has been falling, the front line has crumbled. And who remains? Who stands to stop them on this card? Well, Raw is going to switch over to the Wrecking Ball just to stall it out. Chuba was alive, but he's now fallen into the back line, and that is going to be the San Francisco Shock taking this map in a pretty dominant fashion. That's going to be the 2-0 for them.
Well, Nepal was certainly dragged out a little, but that was one of the fastest maps that I have ever seen on Junkertown. It's a map that's notorious for going really quite long and often having big overtime fights against other teams and really long time bank pushes, but the Shock, they dusted off, field their A roster for this particular meta, and they just destroy the Justice.
What this highlights, I think, is some inflexibility of the Justice, and this is one of the things they're going to have to get over, maybe by picking up some additional talent. But Chuba on the Tracer, like forcing him onto that role rather than taking some of the straight-up duels between Hangzhou and Hangzhou, or Widowmaker versus Widowmaker, allowing Stitch to play some other roles. This is their problem, because Tracer's just not a good pick on Junkertown first point, and Chuba's not even that great at Tracer in the first place. It's a really difficult scenario that they're being forced into, and it comes down to the inflexibility. But I'm curious now what the analyst desk is going to have to say about this one. We're going to go to a quick game break. When we come back, third chat, you're going to watch three beautiful faces. For some reason, I forgot. I thought there was like an additional analyst.
Oh, Jonathan's not that attractive, so two beautiful faces will do it anyway.
Okay, well, all right, we'll do Johnny Dirty like that. Why not? Anyway, we'll see you after the break.
The Overwatch League is brought to you by Zip Chair Gaming, the official chair supplier of the Overwatch League. Hello and welcome to our game break presented by CHEEZIT Grooves. Zoe here, joined by Costa and Reinforce. And we are currently having a 2-0 lead from the San Francisco Shock. Not too surprising. However, heading into that first map, not quite a dominant Shock we are used to. They seem to change things up with highlights such as, Super on Sigma. What are your initial thoughts
I don't know
here?
about highlights.
Whoa!
It was interesting. They came in and they mirrored Washington Justice on this Farah, Arissa Ball, Wrecking Ball Winston, and they played the dive on 2 of the rounds. It felt like they built their roster around those 2 rounds and not around Sanctum. Because, as you said, we have Super on Sigma, which we've never seen before. And we had, a lot of people just on weird roles, Violet's in general over the whole thing. It just felt a little very put together in the old roster and not as, well thought out as we've seen Shock as of late with their full roster. They did get the map in the end, but it definitely was not clean.
Yeah, specifically Sanctum was a bit odd, and Sideshow kind of riffed on it that the Shock weren't necessarily playing with as much aggression. They were kind of just sitting back and waiting for Washington to engage and, do some mistakes and capitalize off of that, which is a bit weird because, as Brennan and Josh said, we're so used to the San Francisco Shock stepping up to the tempo and just, pushing. They just go. That's what they do best and rely on great teamwork and individual skill. But they took it a bit more easy. But then finally on Junkertown, they subbed in, quote-unquote, the main roster with Ans and Choi Obin and Twilight. So they just popped off on point A, quite honestly. I think they went 14-1 on their attack or something. It was nuts.
I mean, this one was tough to watch, honestly, because you did see Justice, making the right compositional choices for most of it, and they did try. It's just they were unfortunately very much outclassed on every single role. And then you have Ans just staying out in the open, in the middle of the field, and not even being contested, because Stitch at that point actually gave up on even playing the Widowmaker and switched to Hanzo for a little bit, because he just, he just couldn't, and sometimes you just can't. Costa, any thoughts on that first, or rather second map?
I think you start to see the holes in the Washington Justice roster when you see them go up against the San Francisco Shock. Stitch does not look comfortable on the Widow, especially at the level that people are playing Widow these days. He even on their attack, he switched to the Hanzo because of how little confidence he had in his ability to match up. And Tuber on the Tracer is good, but once again, it's not to the level that we're seeing as of late from these top teams. And that's sort of why I look at this Washington Justice lineup. I'm like, I would love to see some additions, some specialists come in for this team so that they can be meta-proof. Because I think if we went to sort of a flex DPS meta, I think the Washington Justice would be fine. But in a double hit scan, they look very lost.
Well, and with that, I think it's time for crunch time. And I hate that I always set it up with saying it's time for crunch time, because that just doesn't sound good. So next week I'll come up with a better phrase. Either way, crunch time is coming up right now. Of course, presented by CHEEZIT Grooves. And guess who made it? Yeah.
Yeah. We
Yay.
only had one direction to go here, really. I mean, impressive Sigma performance by the one and only Super.
Yeah.
I think it was a standout
playtime in there as
performance.
well, please.
Yeah, it might be like 2 minutes.
It'd be interesting to see if he's going to replace Choi Oba full time. With these kind of stats, it's kind of hard to argue whether or not he's going to do it in the long term. But great to see him having his supreme flexibility here.
Yeah. This is really what you expect from Super, though. I mean, this is one of those unique performances where he's able to pull out his pocket strats. So great job.
But I think it's good. It has the awe factor. You don't really see it coming, right? So that's clearly working. I mean, they won the map. How can you argue against that?
And that's the thing. Our teams going into next week now going to sit down and research Super Sigma tendencies to make sure that they can counter it properly. Because
and Josh did say that he plays him on stream as well a lot.
Yeah,
so,
exactly. Yeah.
Gotta do some scouting there, everyone.
Yeah, watch out.
Yeah, San Francisco Shock just never ceases to impress us with the enormous depth they have in their roster. And I hope that they, stop playing around with their food and just go hard on that second half, because that is what we're used to from that San Francisco Shock squad. But yeah, that was Crunch Time presented by CHEEZIT Grooves. We're now heading into Blizzard World. Any final thoughts? Any advice maybe for the Justice?
I want to see Stitch try to pop off. Like, I want to see him at least put up some kind of performance and actually take it a little bit to Ons, perhaps. So, you know, I want to see some kind of energy from this team, and I think it starts with Stitch. You know, he was brought into this lineup and try to add some kind of power to the damaged lineup, but, you know, it is a hard task against the San Francisco Shock, but at some point you have to at least start making highlights. It's not even about winning maps or capping points, it's about just getting highlights done and contesting other Tracers or Widowmakers. So I want to see Stitch at least put up some kind of performance.
Yeah, this is definitely a tall order for the Justice to go up against San Francisco Shock. That's a trial by fire, or lava, rather. It's hot, that's what it is, and it's not easy. So let's see what they can get done in that second half. And for all the action, we once more heading over to Josh and Bryn.
The Overwatch League is brought to you by CHEEZIT Groups. Deep flavor, deep crunch. It's a mind crunch. Coca-Cola is the official refreshment of the Overwatch League.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Overwatch League. Hope you enjoyed that game break. We are in the midway point, possibly the midway point, possibly a little bit further on, who knows. Between the San Francisco Shock and the Washington Justice. It's currently 2-0. San Francisco Shock has been, I don't want to say a one-sided affair because map 1 was quite close, but definitely the Shock now coming out swinging, not really giving any chance for Washington to breathe.
Yeah, and this is the San Francisco Shock that we've come to know and come to love.
Where'd you get the gold chain?
I'm just trying new things, you know.
Yeah.
It's quarantine. It's time to express yourself in different ways. Yeah, I do. That's what I'm going for.
You're going to try
actually.
and find some kryptonite. What's going on?
Well, actually, though, no. This is not just a random necklace that I found. This is actually a promise ring, and this ring is Super's promise to me that he'll never play Sigma ever again. So that's why I'm keeping it really close to me, because I had words with the guy after what we saw in map 1. I don't think that he's going to be replacing Choi Obin, but we get a chance to see Choi Obin play again as we head off into Blizzard World, which is going to be our next map. I'm just looking forwards to kind of getting a feel for how good Striker is again. That's more what I'm looking for here. The Washington Justice, they seem like they're being outclassed right now, but it's still a good idea it's still a good scouting opportunity for us to be able to tell whether Striker is still one of the best tracers that we have in the league, because in 2018 he was arguably the best tracer.
Yep, we're going to be heading into Blizzard World, and I completely agree with you, Josh. He was, I think, the best tracer in the world in 2018. It was between him and Sabiobi, arguably.
Yeah,
at the time.
Definitely.
And he definitely made his name for that one. Obviously, a lot of talent that's come into the Overwatch League since then, and Tracer coming back into the meta means that he's a little bit out of practice. But since then, shaking the rust, if you want to call it the rust, I don't really know. But regardless of that, they heading into the match, and Striker has been having a reasonable show of things. I've got to say as well, I was agreeing with what the analyst had to say during the break. A lot of Washington Justice, they're just failing to see a lot of what the damage-dealing players like Stitch and Tuba are kind of not really materializing much. And it sounds like a bit of a two-head kind of opinion, you know what I mean? Where when you say, they just need to get more highlight reels. But I kind of think that Johnny is onto something there. It comes down to individual performances, and I think where you even begin with that as well is playing more to comfort roles, per se.
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons that Justice looked better when they were playing the Pharah Tracer composition on round 1 and round 3 of Nepal. There's not really much opportunity to do that here. It's quite a one-dimensional map in terms of the comps that get played. There isn't much room to play the Tracer. If you try and play Genji, you're just going to get poked as you approach. So yeah. I think you're kind of all in on some kind of Tracer Ashe or Tracer Widowmaker comp.
I will say some teams have been known in the past, maybe not in this particular meta, but have been known to play some Pharah compositions with an Ana, using the Nano Barrage to kind of open up the point. It's almost like a slow siege attempt. And you can run a bit of Pharah on this first point of Blizzard World. There are some angles that you can take. Right now, the Washington Justice is going to be taking that straight-up duel, almost a mirror match. Not quite, though, because Stitch is not going to be running the Widowmaker. On's on his signature role. The character, the hero that he is most well known for. And that's the reason why, because he hits headshots just like that.
And I got to agree with Custer and Reinforce when they were giving their analyst opinions about Stitch just not really being up to scratch compared to the elite level anymore. He certainly has been at times in his player history, but it seems like he's struggling to be able to meet these newer players that have joined the league and just lit the world on fire. People like Ants, we had no idea that this guy would be a Rookie of the Year candidate. I mean, we thought he might be pretty good on the Widowmaker, but he's been able to show us so much more than that.
Washington now have a bit of positioning. They've been able to get up to the point itself. The issue is that a minute's been burned off the clock now. Tuba forced to back off and take health back. Meanwhile, Washington will be trying to take this ground war against the tanks. Butting heads with them, if you will. Stitch going to be trying to take an off angle here to see if he can get a pick or two, but Ans shuts him down almost immediately. His head wasn't even there for a split second before Ans took it off. And now he's going to be taking off angles. He has free reign to just work his way all the way around here. Mortality Field comes out from the Washington Justice, but Violet doesn't even need any assistance to deal with Tuba as he puts an end to his reign in the background.
I gotta be honest with you, Brent. When I saw Violet and Tuba being run, oh my goodness, Striker, please.
What? Oh, come on.
These guys have got to, if it might not be beef, but it's a bit of a rivalry between Janu and Stitch and the guys that were previously on the Vancouver Titans. I don't think that's wrong to say. So I don't think that's necessarily the shot disrespecting the Justice there so much as them enjoying the opportunity to prove dominance over Janu after they had that grand final showdown last year.
And again, you can't keep getting away with this! Please! Oh my goodness. He just finds opportunities and finds the picks. Now, looks like the Justice, they want to be trying to punish some of what the Shock were throwing at them. Punish the aggression. And they lay down the amplification matrix, but the Shock just back off around the corner pretty effectively. And now they're going to be using their own amplification matrix, which is going to force the positioning once more of the Washington Justice. and they burnt them down to 1.5 minutes on the clock. Brutal.
Yeah. The Justice are going to try and push back in here. Double support ult available. Aim God lagging behind in terms of the Transcendence. And Trance could be a difference maker here if the ults get invested in this fight. Choyobin's going to initiate. Immortality Field has got to be there.
Straight back down again. The Immortality Field is there, but it puts in enough damage and separates them enough that Ant is able to get that pick off onto Raw. You lose one of your core anchor tanks like the Orisa like that, it is very difficult. Now only 50 seconds remaining. Stitch is staggering himself even further. Eventually goes down. Another banner. Okay. Striker, didn't know you were a Horde player.
Yeah, claiming territory for the Horde. It's pretty interesting to me to see Violet and Twilight on these roles. I was going to mention that a little earlier on, but now we've got a lull in the action. I expected Violet to be on the Baptiste. He was the best Baptiste that we have seen so far in 2020. And to have him back on the Zenyatta is it's just another hero that he excels at. He's right up there with the best in the world on both of those roles. And so you've just got your choice, really, haven't you?
You're not going to make... Yeah, it's hard to put up a consistent argument to say that Violet shouldn't be playing the Zen, but Arms with another headshot. It is just a bit of a free shooting range, as we said previously. One shot for him in Washington Justice, their last opportunity, their last chance now. They use the Gravitic Flux, but gets answered back immediately with that Transcendence. A couple of shots, it means Bob will get the kill there for Ans, and I don't know how many eliminations the Washington Justice got that game, but I think that was one of the few.
Yeah, very, very few. And that's, I mean, that is just absolute dominance.
I'm not going to sugarcoat it. You know, some people might be a bit angry, they might be a bit annoyed that, you know, we're not saying, well, where's the hype for the Washington Justice? I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This is a brutal game. This is a shock, asserting dominance like they always
stomping.
have. It's a stomping, yeah, it truly is. And the Washington Justice are just not up to scratch because of various things, you know, DPS flexibility, the coordination just isn't there. You know, they picked up some new members, and they're going up against currently the reigning champions, so it's a hard match for them.
Are Stitch and Janu still over in Korea? Have they moved back to the East Coast yet? I think they're with them on the East Coast, right? I don't think they're playing on High Ping anymore.
I'm not too sure. To be honest, I'm not going to claim to know, but...
Not 100% on that. Tweet at us if you know the answer. If you've been following the Justice social posts more than we have, then maybe you'll be able to inform the masses via us.
Hey, you guys want to just do our jobs for us? That's cool. Send us some messages. Doing the research that we probably should be doing.
Yeah, it's whatever the reasons, though, and I think you're right that there are many. The Washington Justice are having just another disappointing year. It's it looked relatively promising for them at the start of the year, but losing players and moving away from the stadium performances.
Sure.
You know, this was a team that was supposed to travel the least and perform the most at home.
That's the thing. One of the things going for the Washington Justice was the fact that they were going to be hosting 5 homestands. It's a lot of games in front of the home crowd, and the home crowd makes a big difference. So, you know, obviously the COVID-19 situation has meant that we've had to move away from the homestands. And it has affected the Washington in more ways.
Look at this comp. Look at this comp.
This is okay. A bit of
Striker Genji.
Striker Genji. Why not?
Violet on the Lucio.
And I do think that this might be actually a legitimate composition here. They're going to be trying to get some aggression in the big Bionade. Forces out the Immortality Field, but now Striker has an off angle. A couple of right clicks sent in with the dash. A lot of damage being pumped into it. Striker up to 50% right now. Going to be using that deflect off cooldown for the time being, but they have put in so much work, so much damage. They can cleave through them. And Washington Justice do not stand a chance. Not even a single ultimate necessary.
They're just playing with their food at that point. Congratulations to the San Francisco Shock for the match win, but the Justice was so scared. They're playing a poke comp and they don't even poke the divers as they come in. I mean, there are leagues of difference there between those two teams. We went from, you know, a bit of a roll to start the day, an amazing match in the middle, and then an utter stomping to finish. Yep. The tiers of difference between the Shock and the Justice. It's not even, I can't even produce the words to explain the levels of that are in between these two teams.
Yeah, I do think that, you know, we could spend hours analyzing, breaking down what the Justice are missing in this match, but at the end of the day, they were up against the reigning champions. Sometimes the match is just going to be like that. A good showing, though, from the Shock, I think, that they were showcasing a variety of flexibility, a variety of roles as well, showing that, you know, some of the players that may be spending a bit of time on the bench can still hang around and still play and compete.
Do you think, Bren, that we're going to see the Striker Genji and the Violet Lucio in later games?
I'll be honest with you, Striker Genji is a thing that I know back in the day is a role that he used to be quite proficient at.
Really?
We never really saw it in pro games. But it's a role that he could play. So I wouldn't be surprised if that strategy was something that they employed. But we're going to go to our player of the match now, and it is going to be Violet. He played in all 3 maps, and he's just been putting up the consistent performances that are worthy. But we could have given this award to quite a few players, I think, on the San Francisco Shock.
I'm going to be honest, there wasn't really like a player that stood out because the difference in competition was just enormous. Goliath well and truly crushed David today. He took a little pebble to the face in map 1 and he said, all right, well, how about this? And just dropped a boulder on David's head.
Wow. Beautiful analogy. Wonderful.
Yeah.
We're waiting on, I believe, an interview for the time being. But I think there's a lot to build upon if you're the Washington Justice. And if you are going to be looking at any silver linings of this match, you've got to be looking at it as in what can we improve at. And I think they need to be focusing more on some of their strengths of some of the what their players like to play. You know, Chuba, he's no Tracer player. Stitch, he's no Widowmaker player. I think they got a little bit unlucky with Junkatan actually, because that does kind of force you into those roles quite unnaturally just on the basis of the way the map is designed. If they got away with, you know, a different map, different escort map, they could have maybe gotten away with playing some of the more comfort picks, and it would have been maybe a more competitive game at the end of the day.
Yeah, it could have been. My attention really, though, is on the San Francisco Shock, because this team made the finals of the May Melee, and then they beat the Florida Mayhem 4-2 in that game. And they looked dominant in the maps where they had Super playing the Reinhardt, and they could play Rush, and they adapted throughout the series to incorporate more Torbjorn into the gameplay, and they eventually found out a counter to the Ashe Tracer composition. But now that we're seeing more and more teams adopt Ashe Tracer, it seems like that's become kind of the de facto strongest comp, at least within this hero pool, and certainly within North American meta. So with Shock up at the top here, at the top of the tables, and anticipating if they don't meet the Fusion somewhere along, that they'll meet one of these amazing Ashe Tracer teams again. I wonder, Brent, like, do you think they're still favored? Like, if you saw an Ashe Tracer matchup against, for example, the LA Valiant, do you think that Shock would be able to hold on to this pole position?
It's an interesting question, I think. Moving forward, I think there's going to be...
I thought you were just going to dismiss me with the moving forward.
No, I'm not going to move forward. I think that we're only going to really have questions in our mind whether or not the Shock are the most dominant team when they actually go up against some better teams, and that's going to be the Summer Showdown. I'm not sure what the next match is for the San Francisco Shock. That might be it for them, actually, in terms of the qualification matches. I'm not too sure. They may have one more, actually, on the
I will look it up for you. It is, in fact, the Philadelphia Fusion, the team that they are tied at number 1 spot with right now. It's the Philadelphia Fusion next week, so that will give us a great idea. Philly are not really an Ashe Tracer team themselves.
Right.
They play kind of a bit more spread out comps, but it will be an amazing test.
No hero pools as well, so that's what we're going to be moving into for the final week of the qualification matches. So that's going to be really interesting to see. A bit of maybe a preview of potentially our grand finals. It's bound to be a good match, actually, that one, and that's where a lot of our questions are going to remain, because I think for the longest time people have been wanting to dethrone Shock from that number 1 spot in their minds. For some reason, people have always made them out to be the villains. I don't know why that's the case, because I've always loved the San Francisco Shock. I think they've got some wholesome personalities. How could you not love Super's adorable face at the end of the day? So it's funny to me that people do see the San Francisco Shock as these villains that need to be dethroned, but the answer to that question is probably going to be happening next week, so that's something to look forward to.
Yes, and I think that that's a really interesting one. It's not necessarily going to be a preview of our finals, considering that we've seen the Valiant look so phenomenal so far. I think there's definitely upset potential in the Summer Showdown, but the Shock are just looking dominant right now.
All right, well, we've got a nice little interview with Custer, and he's got a very special young lad down on the floor. Actually, not quite the floor in his bedroom. It's Super. Take it away, Custer.
Thank you very much, Bren. Yeah, Super is joining me after, an interesting first map. You guys struggled in that map. Is that how you expected that first map to go, considering the rest of the series?
I mean, I think we made a few mistakes. Like, on Sanctum specifically, now, I can own up to it. I didn't play my most inspirational Sigma I've ever played. you know, I made a few mistakes. And then when we went back to the dive comp, we also made a few mistakes as a team. But I think we just, you know, kept our cool and just moved on, because you can't be stuck on a mistake. You know this. You were a former player.
Yeah.
You got to just move on to the next fight.
Were you in on that map just so you guys could play Pharah? Like, so you play the Wrecking Ball, so you can play Pharah on Village and Shrine?
We feel like when we want to play Ball Monkey that me and Smurf have the best coordination with that. And I think me and Striker on our dives, we were also really coordinated when I'm on Ball and he's on Tracer. So it was kind of just an easy flow into the things for us, and it worked in scrims and, you know, worked in the match, so.
Yeah, no, it was time you guys came out. The most important thing. Sideshow actually has a promise ring around his neck now that he said you gave him that you would never play Sigma again. Is this true, or are you going to try and redeem yourself at some point?
Yeah, I don't know what that was about. I'll be honest. I saw the halftime segment. I feel like I was kind of done a little bit dirty. Maybe show the ball stats. I thought those were a little more inspirational. I played like, what, 3 minutes of Sigma? You got to cut me some slack. But you never know what can happen. In the future. That's what I'll say.
Moving into a more serious question. You guys have so many great players that don't really get to see a lot of playtime because of metas and all that kind of stuff. You, especially as of late, coming out of the GOATS meta, how do you deal with this as a personal player to keep improving?
I mean, I feel like the biggest thing is, like, we all kind of realize that Overwatch, it's kind of a game that can change quickly. So you got to learn how to be a selfless player and not, you know, take everything as a personal, like, you know, vendetta against you for not playing. And because, you know, we have, you know, so many different players who play, you know, the best in their roles, best of their heroes, it's hard to squeeze everyone into a, you know, a playtime. Like, you know, Rascal didn't play at all today, but we all know Rascal is one of the best, if not the best DPS player in the league, and that's just how it goes sometimes. You got to just know that it's a team game, and sometimes you got to sit one back for the team.
Yeah, absolutely, man. All right, so earlier in the day, we saw you and your dad did a VOD review. How important is your family support to you as a professional player? Because we saw so much of it in the 2019 season. Does it really help you and give you that extra boost?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of a process to get to that point.
I know that feeling.
Because, you know, I was kind of didn't really tell what I was doing. I thought I was just like playing games late and being annoying or whatever.
Yeah.
But once, you know, we got the record straight, it actually does mean a lot to have, you know, your parents and your family support you like that. It really does help.
Yeah, that's absolutely awesome. So we have a clip that we're going to play right now. We're going to look at it, and then I'm going to ask you a very important question. Let's see it right now.
Hard to succeed. So I'm very proud of them.
Happy Father's Day. Thanks for always, you know, sticking with me. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Love you, son.
All right, so Super, what's going on here? Okay, your dad said I love you, and you didn't say it back. What?
Okay,
come on.
I don't know what it is with these producers at Overwatch League, but I need to come for someone's job. This happens all the time. I swear to God, someone has a vendetta out for me. I have the recording on my computer. I actually said I love you first. They cut that part out for some reason, and then my dad said love you back afterwards. I don't know who has it out for me at the Overwatch League production studio, but I'm gonna find you. I swear, I will find you.
The producers are shaking their boots. Okay, redemption, okay? Any special message you have for your dad on Father's Day right now?
I do. It is Father's Day. I said this last year when we won Stage 2 for my mother for Mother's Day. So I will say on Father's Day, Happy Father's Day, Dad. I love you. I appreciate everything you do for me. Thank you.
Awesome. The record is set straight. Okay, Super, thank you very much for the interview. It was awesome, man. Congratulations
once again. Thank you, Costa.
All right, sweet. Watchpoint post show is coming right up with me, Johnny, and Soy. Make sure to stick around, and we'll see you soon.
Goodbye.